She thought you'd always be there. Not because you said you would, but because you stayed. Through the storms, her silence, the emotional withdrawals. You stood there like an anchor while she drifted in and out, assuming your presence was permanent. But the truth is, you stayed. Until you didn't. And when your silence finally arrived, not loud, not dramatic, just firm, she didn't know what to do. That silence wasn't absence. It was power. It was the first time she faced herself without you buffering her reflection. There's a specific panic that hits when the man who used to explain himself stops talking. When the texts stop, when the typing bubble never shows up. When the man who once fought for closeness now doesn't flinch at distance, that's when her ego starts to crack. She checks her phone, but there's nothing, no notifications, no breadcrumbs, no digital trace of the man who used to orbit her like a planet around the sun. Because now, the sun has gone cold. And suddenly, she realizes she mistook your consistency for blindness, your patience for weakness. You were always the lighthouse. Until the light went out, she took your presence for granted. She thought your affection was a faucet, something she could twist on and off. She forgot that even calm water has the power to flood. You brought clarity. She brought chaos. You gave presence. She played games. And still, you stayed, not because you were naive, but because you believed in the potential, the small glimpses of softness she revealed. But belief has a breaking point. And once crossed, it never resets. The minute you stop showing up for the version of her she pretended to be, she finally saw the version of herself she never wanted to face, and that's when the real shift began. Not in her world, but in yours. Because the power wasn't in disappearing, it was in detaching. You didn't slam the door. You didn't block her. You just stopped reacting. No more late night scrolling. No more waiting on a reply. No more chasing a woman who only ever gave you enough to keep you uncertain. That silence, it was louder than anything you could have said. She felt it, not because you were angry, but because for the first time, you were simply ... The energy shifted. She used to control the dynamic, giving just enough, then pulling away to test your chase. And you complied, because you thought devotion meant self-sacrifice. But here's the truth. Women don't respect what's always available. When your energy is predictable, you become replaceable. And the moment you went quiet, not to manipulate, but because you woke up, was the moment her control vanished. Her ego trembled because she no longer knew how to read you. She was used to your emotional transparency. Now, you're the enigma. And that mystery, it burns. You didn't become emotionless, you became detached. You still feel, but your value no longer depends on her acknowledgement. You've unplugged from the emotional slot machine she thought you'd play forever, and that detachment, that's power. You no longer explain yourself to someone who only listened when you begged. You stopped auditioning for a role in her life. When you finally remembered the lead role in your own. And now, she feels it in her gut. Not as longing, but as regret. She thought she had time. Time to ignore. Time to disappear and return. Time to keep you on the hook. But emotional detachment isn't a tantrum, it's evolution. She's realizing now that the silence she used to weaponize has become your weapon of peace. You're no longer reacting to her signals because you no longer crave them. You're no longer decoding her subtleties because you've stopped needing the message. You've stopped needing her dot, and now she's scrambling. Subtle reach-outs, breadcrumbs, a like here, a vague story post there. But the difference is this: you're not starving anymore. You're no longer chasing the illusion of connection. You've filled the space she once occupied with self-respect, clarity, and a grounded presence that makes you magnetic, not because you seek her approval, but because you finally stopped needing it. She's losing grip, and you're not even reaching back. Asterisk, here is part 3 of your rewritten Stoic Edge YouTube script, continuing seamlessly from parts 1 and 2. This segment explores the psychological rewiring of a woman when she loses control over a man she once emotionally influenced, using deep emotional language and stoic masculinity as the narrative frame. You have to understand this. When a woman feels her grip on you slipping, she doesn't immediately feel heartbreak. She feels confusion. It's like watching her reflection change in a mirror she once controlled. She used to know exactly how you'd react. A cold text, a delayed response, a vague story aimed to trigger jealousy. These were her tools. But now they're just empty gestures, because the man she once emotionally conditioned is no longer emotionally conditioned. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't chase. And this creates a rupture in her psychological framework because her identity was built on your attention. When a woman begins to sense she's no longer the emotional priority, her subconscious goes into survival mode. Not because she loves you more, but because the loss of control feels like death to the ego. She replays old interactions in her head, wondering what changed. She stalks your social media not to admire, but to investigate. She's not looking for a new woman, she's looking for your emotional pulse. The irony is that your stillness becomes the thunder. You used to react. Now you just exist. That existence, unshaken and untouched by her games, becomes the very thing that drives her mad. This is the moment she starts to spiral inward, not in chaos, but in realization. That maybe, just maybe, she mistook your love for dependence. That your consistency wasn't weakness, it was devotion. That the man she thought would always wait no longer even watches, and now she starts reaching. Subtle tests. A heart emoji on a meme. This reminded me of you message out of nowhere. But these aren't invitations. They're scans for signs of life. She's looking for any flicker of that old version of you, but what she doesn't realize is that man is gone. Not bitter, just evolved. Women don't miss your words. They miss the way your presence once made them feel powerful. And when that emotional mirror breaks, when you no longer reflect their worth back to them, they're left alone with a question they can't answer. Who am I without his attention? That's when she starts to regress. She might lash out subtly or become overly sweet. She might bring up memories that you forgot long ago. All of it is a desperate bid to rebuild the frame she once occupied at the center of your emotional life. But you've reclaimed that frame, not with malice, but with maturity. Understand this: women are not fragile, but their sense of emotional authority over a man who's awakened, that's fragile. And once broken, it rarely recovers, because you didn't just walk away. You outgrew the dynamic. You didn't yell, block, or insult her. You simply stopped auditioning for a part in her theater. And now, she stands backstage, wondering why the spotlight won't come back on. The truth? You took it with you. And now, the masculine energy you've stepped into, it's not cold, but it's grounded. It's not manipulative, but it's unfazed. That makes you dangerous in the most silent way. Because the man who no longer craves validation is the one no woman can predict. Your silence is no longer a tactic, it's a standard. Your peace is no longer dependent on her emotion. You've become the mountain. And when a woman realizes she can no longer move you, she either climb or walk away. But you no longer wait at the base.